Welcome back, guys, to the No Filter Friday show. I, of course, am John Knopick. Thank you guys very, very, very much for tuning in, be it either on the podcast feeds or through our YouTube as well. Greatly, greatly appreciate you guys joining me on another week inside this crazy world that we are currently living in. Getting stranger by the day, it seems. But thank you guys so much for hanging in with me. It's much appreciated. We've gone over the last several episodes. We dove into everything wrong with the world, solutions, and things like that. Last week, we decided to take a little break from all of that and look into the nostalgia aspect, since last week was our nation's birthday on Friday, July 4th. And then now this week, I decided I was looking at possibly doing an AI-themed episode, but I'm still in the process of trying to find a good co-host, or potentially maybe doing a collaboration and having several people and actually creating an actual crew for our show instead of just one co-host, having 3 or 4 of us running this crazy chaotic space here. So I'm still in the works for that. If you are still interested and haven't reached back out, NFFSHOW on all social media platforms. November Foxtrot, Sierra, Hotel, Oscar, Whiskey, for those of you in the military or veterans with the phonetic alphabet experience, NFFSHOW. Reach out to me if you're still interested in becoming a potential co-host, or if you'd like to see about maybe becoming a co-host with several other people, and we could possibly get together and see if we could put a whole crew on this and make it even more chaotic than it already is. But for this week's episode, I decided to go into a little different direction. As I said, I was thinking about doing the AI-themed episode. That most likely will be coming next week. It takes a little more of an undertaking compared to these normal episodes that I've been doing, because that one we're going to have a lot more images and videos and audio clips and a much bigger production than what we have been doing here over these last 6, now 7 episodes. Musical-themed episodes down the road as well. But for this week's episode, I decided to dive into a topic that is near in a topic or profession or whatever you want to call it, that is near and dear to my heart. Something that has been a part of my life, a staple of my life for over 40 years. And that, of course, is crocheting and everything regarding needlepoint. I'm all about that needlepoint, guys. You know, give me a crochet set up or throw pillow and I'm good to go. Of course, if you know me or know anything about me or have seen any of my posts on social media platforms, you'll see that one of my all-time favorite loves is professional wrestling and everything tied to it. And yes, this will be a topic that some people will cringe about and give me a guff on, and that's totally fine. Again, as I said, this is a safe space. It's unfiltered. I'm unapologetic. I'm unbothered. And this is unedited. So, professional wrestling is obviously not everyone's cup of tea. Other people like, soap operas. They like their shows, their reality TV shows, like, the Kardashians or the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills or things like that. And that's fine. More power to you if you're a big fan of those reality television type programs. I myself have been a professional wrestling fan for over 40 years. My origin story dates all the way back to 1984 when my father actually was a wrestling fan too. And he always claims, you already know this is all scripted and but he still watched it anyways. And obviously, not trying to pull back any curtains that ever have not already been pulled back in one form or fashion, but obviously, yes, we do understand and we do acknowledge the fact that the outcomes are predetermined. But much the same way when you go into any movie theater to sit down and watch, Fantastic Four or any of the Marvel movies or the DC movies or even, like Fast and Furious or How to Train Your Dragon. Everything is predetermined. There is an ending. There is already a determined ending. And wrestling is the exact same way. There are good guys. There are bad guys. There are tweeners in the middle. You don't know which side they're going to be on. Sometimes they go good. Sometimes they go bad. And yeah, everything is predetermined, obviously, but the moves are real. The potential for injury is obviously very real. People have broken bones, people have become paralyzed, people have legitimately died in the ring if moves are performed incorrectly, or if something happens and they slip up and things go haywire. You can paralyze people, you can kill people. So even though it's predetermined, there's still suspense and drama and a bunch of other things all rolled into it as well. The genesis behind professional wrestling is it's an escape. It's literally an escape. It's a way for people for hours at a time each week to sit back and just forget about everything that's going on in the world, forget about all of their bills, forget about all the chaos that's befallen them, and just absorb and engage with the performers on the screen. Be it, either if you're in person watching it live, if you're on, watching it on TV, on Max or on Netflix or Peacock, if you're watching the PLE of WWE, for example. It's just a chance for you to get away from the world for a little while, hours at a time. And we all need that. That's why you go to the movies. You want to be immersed in that culture, immersed in what's being displayed upon the screen. And you wanna feel like you're in that world, even for the smallest amount of time. So, there are those people out there who find wrestling to be pointless and comical. And that's fine. That is your opinion, and that's the beauty of the world. We all have our own opinions, and we're all entitled to those. But at the same time, there are people out there who take things way too seriously, like on a parasocial level. And it for the most part, it tends to be males towards females, but there have been cases of females stalking male wrestlers too. But unfortunately, there are some wackadoos out there who have formed these weird, unusual, and unsubstantiated parasocial relationships with wrestlers and feel like, oh, they're my soulmate, or they're talking to me through the screen. I must go meet them in person. And sometimes to the point where they're breaking into their houses, trying to get as close as they can to those people. And those are very unstable, dangerous individuals. Happens all the time. Like, for example, recent examples, Liv Morgan, who is a WWE superstar. She had someone stalking her and trying to, get into her home in Orlando. Sonya Deville, who used to be a WWE wrestler who no longer is with the company. She actually had an individual break into her house while she was there with one of her friends who was another former WWE wrestler, and was almost kidnapped and held hostage. Luckily, she was able to escape, and the person was caught, and he was convicted. And there was another instance where an individual, it wasn't even someone stalking a wrestler, but it was stalking the company. There was a gentleman who felt like he was the greatest, going to be the greatest wrestler of all time, and he went outside the Performance Center in Orlando and refused to leave when they told him, hey, you've been trespassed. We don't feel comfortable you being here. You need to leave. He wouldn't leave and ended up being shot by police. So, yeah, I mean, it is a way to escape things, but at the same time, unfortunately, some people take things too far and too seriously, and because of that, bad things end up happening or can happen. So, yeah, I mean, it is a profession, it's something that, again, it's part of my DNA and has been for 40 years. I've been to many events, some I will be covering here in this episode. I have friends that are in the wrestling industry, both performers as well as commentators, as well as like YouTube personalities, internet personalities that cover wrestling. I love it. Would I ever consider being a professional wrestler? No. I don't have the body makeup for it. I don't have the mental fortitude. I mean, I could probably cut a really good promo given the opportunity. But I could never see myself doing the moves they do. And I'm in my mid 40s. I would be on the the tail end of their what they're looking for as far as athletes go, because now they're looking more younger and younger, in the 20s and 30s. So if you were in your 40s and you were in professional wrestling, you most likely have already been part of the business for at least a decade or two. You wouldn't just be coming in fresh in your mid 40s. They, especially with like WWE and AEW and all of the bigger named companies out there, they're looking for the young, built, jacked people that they can build around for years and decades. You could probably, I mean, I'm like I said, I'm 45. I could probably get in on some like indie promotions and things like that. Do some like in wrestling in high school gyms or, cafeterias or, bingo halls and things like that. But I would never be able to make it to the mainstream. So that would be something that I would never aspire to try to do. Not that I wouldn't be interested, but it would something that would never happen. But my origin story, as I said, was back in 1984. It started out with my parents and family and I going to a house show, a WWF at the time. It was World Wrestling Federation. Now it's World Wrestling Entertainment, because they had a big falling out with the World Wildlife Fund, and WWE decided, you know what, we're not going to pursue this. We're just going to drop the EF and become WWE instead, World Wrestling Entertainment, because they looked more on the entertaining side, less on the wrestling side for a while. But in 1984, I went to a WWF house show in Cedar Rapids at the Five Seasons Center. I don't know what they're calling it nowadays. God only knows. It's been through so many name changes. But it was the Five Seasons Center. And we got to see all of our wrestling stars there. And the big one that stood out to me was Hacksaw Jim Duggan wrestling Andre the Giant. And yeah, if you ever had the fortune and honor and privilege to be at an event where Andre was there, when they say he's larger than life, legitimate. That guy was incredibly tall and built. I mean, he unfortunately lost his life very young due to his genetic disease that he had, that his gigantism that caused essentially his body to not be able to handle the pressure of the continuous growth, and he passed away. But getting to see him wrestle Hacksaw Jim Duggan, and the way the crowd was going back and forth, and Hacksaw was getting beaten down, but he was like fighting back, and he was asking for the crowd to get into it. Everybody was cheering, and the back and forth, and the storytelling and the drama. I mean, that hooked me as a 4-year-old. That got me exceptionally interested and wanting to watch even more, to the point where we were watching. They had like Saturday morning superstars on WWF programming, and then eventually they rolled out Monday Night Raw and Friday Night SmackDown, but that was many years later. But still getting to see it on a weekly basis, ingrained it and laid the foundation for my love of professional wrestling, and getting to and to the point where I bought like the wrestling plush buddies of the Ultimate Warrior and Hulk Hogan. I bought it was like a storage cube that had like the Bushwhackers on one side, the Rockers on another side, and I stored all my toys in there. It became, as I said, it became an ingrained part of my life, and something that it has been to this day, 41 years later. And now, in that same vein, my son is now 5.5, and I've gotten him into wrestling, so much so that he has his own championship belt. I have my championship belts. My wife, even though she was very reluctant, I still got her one, and she has her championship belt. And there are times I'll just be walking around the house, and I'll just put my belt on, sling it over my shoulder, walk around, thinking I'm the bee's knees, if we're going to go old school terminology, and thinking I'm the end all be all. And then my son sees me doing it. His face lights up. He immediately runs over to our shelf, grabs his belt, puts it over his shoulder, and does the same thing. I've shown him matches on TV. We actually watched a bit of WrestleMania this year together on Peacock. Because obviously we wouldn't have been able to afford tickets to go all the way out to Las Vegas, that's for sure. But yeah, I've gotten him into it, and it's something that I had always hoped I'd be able to pass on to my offspring, and now I got the opportunity to. We're actually looking at taking him to his first live wrestling event this Friday night at the Bridgestone Arena in Nashville for Friday Night SmackDown. So this will be his first chance to ever see the guys live in person. And I hope it really opens his eyes the way it opened my eyes when I went to that show in Cedar Rapids. And I look at it and I go, some fathers pass grease monkey tendencies down to their sons. They love to build cars, and they pass that love onto their son. Some people, love collecting baseball cards, and they pass that down to their son. Mine, I'm glad, is professional wrestling because it's something that has withstood the test of time. And obviously, even before 1984, wrestling has been around in professional form way longer than that. You had the WWF, Worldwide Wrestling Federation, before it became WWF. They had the territories back in the day. You had your Andy Kaufmans, you had your Jerry Lawlers, you even had, go all the way back, Bruno Sammartino, Gagne. You have all of these guys way back, 30s, 40s, 50s. And so it's something that has withstood the test of time and will continue to stand the test of time. As the world evolves, so does the world of professional wrestling. And that's something that I really am excited for him to continue to learn about, love, get into. And hell, if he, down the road, my wife and I have already decided we're not going to push him. And he's going to be able to decide whatever he wants to do as far as his extracurricular activities and what he wants to get into as far as hobbies and things. If he comes out and says, "Hey, Dad, I want to try out. I want to try and become a professional wrestler," I'll be like, "Hell yeah, dude! I'm your biggest fan already. I'm ready to sign that merch that you give me, and I'm ready for you to sign the merch, and I'm ready to see what you can do in the ring." And I would look at getting him set up for classes and things if he's interested in it. Because he's got the energy, he's got the drive, he's got the passion. He's definitely a talker, so I think he checks a lot of boxes when it comes to what a professional wrestler is nowadays. And I would love to be able to see him make inroads in that profession. Again, like I said, it's 100% going to be his call, whatever he wants to do. I think it would be amazing to see him get into that. I get to show him not only the wrestling now, what's going on in current times, but I also have the opportunity to show him previous matches and things that spoke to me. In case in point, if you see some of my outfits, sometimes I wear the black and white colors of one of the greatest, if not the greatest, wrestling faction group of all time, and that, of course, is the NWO, the New World Order. They debuted back in the mid-90s inside World Championship Wrestling when it was still around, and unfortunately folded in 2002. And they were comprised originally, the NWO was comprised of, it was a brainchild idea of Eric Bischoff, who at the time was the president of World Championship Wrestling. He was the biggest executive that was on screen, and he decided, I want to shake things up. I want to blur the lines between reality and fiction, and I want people to not know what's going to happen from week to week and make them tune in. So he knew that there were a couple contracts coming up on the WWF side, and that were the contracts of Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, and both of them were basically not wanting to re-sign just because they felt like they weren't getting the best deal. So Eric, with the blessing of Ted Turner, who is the owner of World Championship Wrestling and Turner Sports, said, "Hey, you got an open checkbook here, dude. Bring in whoever you want to get our product really taking off." So Eric reached out to Scott and to Kevin and said, "Hey guys, I'm looking at building this new faction and really turning this company and the professional wrestling world as a whole on its ear. Are you all interested?" And they're like, "Absolutely." So on one episode of Nitro, WCW Monday Nitro, that was their alternative to the WWF's Monday Night Raw show, you had Scott Hall just appear in the audience and jumping the guardrail completely out of the blue. Like, whereas nowadays, you hear with social media and the internet being what it is, you have all of these grumblings of, hey, this person's contract is coming up. There's rumors they're going to go to this company or that company. Surprise shock debuts are not as commonplace, unfortunately, nowadays as they were back in those days. So you had Scott Hall jumping the guardrail and completely out of the blue. And of course, you know, the announcers themselves, who I believe at the time were Tony Schiavone, who's now an AEW announcer, and Larry Zbyszko, they were on their headsets and they were like, what's going on? What's he doing here? And they didn't acknowledge him by name, but they knew who he was, and played it off as if it was a shock to them too. And it kept the audience engaged, going, whoa, what the hell's going on? This guy's a WWF superstar. Are they invading WCW? Is there an invasion going on? And then you have Scott get in the ring and cut his iconic promo. He's like, you know, and his words were, and I quote, everyone, you know who I am, but you don't know why I'm here. And from that moment on, that kicked off the invasion angle, what we thought was an invasion angle. And Scott kept appearing on WCW programming and talking about, you know, hey, this is where the big boys play, huh? And basically saying, we are coming, we're taking over. And then he's like, you know, he wanted to have a match. He wanted to have a tag team match, came and approached and confronted Bischoff about it and said, hey, you know, you get two of your guys. You get Sting and you get Macho Man. And I got my guy. And Eric's like, who's your guy? I don't see anybody. Who's your guy? Eric and Scott points. Eric turns around, looks up, and there's Kevin Nash, looking very, very, very intimidating, looking down at him. And he basically said, you know, this, you know, the measuring stick has just changed around here, pal. And, you know, and they proceeded. And then later on, they had a pay-per-view called The Great American Bash, where they, again, confronted him, said we want our match and things like that. And Eric's like, I can't do it. And they're like, you can't do it. And then Kevin Nash powerbombed Eric off the stage. And then they finally ended up having a match, the tag team match of what they called themselves the Outsiders, Hall and Nash, against Sting and Macho Man, with Lex Luger, because they wanted to do a 3-on-3. So they had their three guys on the WCW side. The Outsiders had their two. And they're like, well, who's going to be the third man? Who's the third guy? Who's the person on their team? And it was originally a handicap. It started out as a handicap match, the 3 versus the 2. Everything broke down. And then at the time, Hulk Hogan was the red and yellow. He had already moved over from WWF into WCW. He was American. He had American Made was his theme song. And everything broke down in the match, and then Hogan comes down to the ring, and everybody's like, Hulk Hogan's here! And it was Dusty Rhodes, Bobby the Brain Heenan, and I believe it was Tony Schiavone. Those are the 3 on commentary. And Dusty's like, Hulk's in the building, baby! And Bobby the Brain Heenan, one of the greatest mouthpieces of all time in the history of professional wrestling, rest in peace, Bobby, said, yes, but whose side is he on? And they're like, what are you talking about? Hogan gets in the ring. Everybody's thinking he's going to clear house and take out the Outsiders. Instead, he shoves referee Randy Anderson aside and drops the leg on the Macho Man, and boom. The third man has been revealed, Hulk Hogan. And that's where the NWO was officially born. And all of the trash was thrown into the ring. You had Mean Gene Okerlund coming in for an interview. And Hogan's like, this is the new world order of professional wrestling. And he basically cut a very scathing heel promo. And everybody was just totally blown away. Like one of the biggest swerves and heel turns in the history of the business. And there was tons of garbage being thrown in the ring. And that kicked off one of the greatest factions in the history of professional wrestling. One that I still love to this day. Unfortunately, though, as time went on, they continued to bring in new members, defectors from WCW into NWO, and it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And they even had their own pay-per-view one event was completely the NWO. It was called NWO Sold Out. And it was the only time that a WCW pay-per-view was hosted by a different entity in this case. It was the NWO, and it was everything NWO. Everything was in black and white. Everything was 100% NWO, and it was all NWO bias. And it actually took place in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, at the Five Seasons Center. My best friend Matt had the pleasure and the opportunity to go to it, and he had an absolute blast. And I still watch that pay-per-view from time to time, just because I loved the production value of it. I loved how everything was set up. It was just incredible, top to bottom. But like I said, unfortunately, they kept bringing in more and more members, and then they tried to outsource ahead. They tried to have like NWO Japan, NWO different countries. They even tried to do like a little NWO Nitro, like they were taking over Nitro, and it just got too big. And then eventually they split into NWO Hollywood, which is the black and white brand, and NWO Wolfpack, which was Kevin Nash's red and black lead brand. And then they had a big blowout and everything blew up. And then they eventually, around 99, 2000, they tried to rekindle the NWO with Kevin Nash, Jeff Jarrett, and Hogan. But it kind of petered out. And the final in the final instance of the NWO was in WWE after WCW folded, because WWE bought them out, because Bischoff tried to have his little conglomerate business partners come together to buy out WCW, because WCW had a merger with Time Warner that was coming up, or I'm sorry, Turner Network was having a merger with Time Warner and AOL Time Warner, and Time Warner basically didn't want wrestling anymore on the Turner networks. So Bischoff was trying to get his business partners together to buy WCW so they could shop it onto a different avenue and continue the company to keep it going. Unfortunately, Vince McMahon and the WWE outbid them, and WCW was sold to WWE, and WWE absorbed everything. And for the time, for a little while, they were the only wrestling company in business. And WWE tried to do their own little invasion angle with WCW and ECW, which was another amazing, incredible wrestling promotion run by Paul Heyman, which unfortunately, again, absorbed and fell off right around the same time, 99, 2000. But the last instance of the NWO was when Hogan, Hall, and Nash came in, as Vince McMahon was saying, I'm tired of WWE. I built WWE. I'm going to kill it by injecting it with a dose of poison. And then he turns in his chair and shows the NWO logo. And Hall and Nash and Hogan show up, and they did a little thing, but it ended up not really amounting to much. I mean, they had a couple pay-per-view matches where they had some feuds with Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock, but that was it. And unfortunately now, Scott Hall is no longer with us. He passed away, and yeah, it was very sad. I mean, he was battling health things for quite a while, and they were hoping he could hold on, but unfortunately he didn't. So now it's just Kevin Nash and Hogan of the original two remaining of the NWO. They still have a lot of the other guys that were joined. They're still around too, but not in that sense. But yeah, I mean, this, like I mentioned to you, this is something that went from an idea and a thought in 1996 all the way to 2000. I think it was 2003 was when they their last appearance. So it was about 7-8 years that it lasted in some form or fashion. It was heavy into WCW for many years. And that's the thing, professional wrestling, if it's done right and the storytelling is done right, you can sustain things for many years. Like everybody, for one of the most recent extended storylines was the Bloodline in WWE, with Roman Reigns being champion for over 4 years. 4 calendar years. Because before, you didn't see title reigns, world championship heavyweight title reigns lasting longer than a year it was not commonplace at all because titles changed hands way too frequently. So to have something last almost half a decade was something that nobody saw coming, but it just continued to go and go and go. And in the same vein, his nephews, the Usos, Jimmy and Jay Uso, were tag champions at the same time, and they suddenly became the longest tag champions, and their bloodline faction held all of the gold. Eventually, Cody Rhodes, who defected from Cody Rhodes, I'll give you a little storyline on him really quick. Cody Rhodes was part of the Rhodes family, is part of the Rhodes family. His father, Dusty Rhodes, as I mentioned, the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, was one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. And he had done many circuits, from the NWA, where he was world champion, the National Wrestling Alliance, to WCW, to WWF, WWE. He even helped build and shape NXT, which is a WWE brand promotion. And he had his main two sons were Cody and Dustin, both of which were in WWE. Cody was in there as Stardust. He was also in as Dashing Cody Rhodes. Dustin Rhodes, you might, if you are a wrestling fan, and I hope you are if you're listening to this and have been listening, thank you so much for listening. Dustin Rhodes, of course, was most famously known in WWEF as Gold Dust. And then he went over to WCW briefly, and he went into a horrific gimmick called Seven, which lasted like one episode of Nitro, where he came down in this like black trench coat, white, total, his entire head was shaved bald, and he was painted white. And he comes down and he cuts a promo in the ring going, "You got me dressing up, looking like Uncle Fester." And he's like, "I am not doing this crap." And he basically walks out and he quits. But Cody was in WWF, WWE, and for a long time. And then he left the company, and he has his friends who are known as the Young Bucks, Nick and Matt Jackson, and his other friend, Kenny Omega, who's, again, one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. And if you ever watch one of Kenny's matches, you would agree with that. And Hangman Adam Page. And the five of them were called the Elite. And they formed what was called the Bullet Club in New Japan Pro Wrestling. And after that, they were approached by Tony Khan, who is his dad owns the Jacksonville Jaguars. And they said, "Hey, we're looking at getting into the wrestling business." Tony Khan said, "Yeah, and we're looking to start up a wrestling promotion. We want one that's going to compete with WWE and is going to provide an alternative, an actual wrestling alternative. And we want you guys to help us build it." And the five of them created what is now called All Elite Wrestling. And it's been around for just over 5 years. They're going to have their main big pay-per-view called All In this Saturday at Globe Life Field in Arlington, Texas, home of the Texas Rangers. So Cody Rhodes left WWE, joined All Elite Wrestling, helped them build that from the ground up. And then after that, essentially when his contract was up, he decided, he didn't want to re-sign with them. So in the world of wrestling, is never say never is one of the biggest catchphrases. And in this case, he actually ended up coming back to WWE as the American Nightmare. And they let him keep his theme music he uses now. They let him keep his graphics that he uses now. And the whole big premise behind it was, will Cody finish his story? Because no Rhodes member had ever held the World Heavyweight Championship in WWE. Dustin never did. Cody never did. Dusty never did. And that was the whole big genesis behind Cody's return, was to finish his story. And at the time, Roman was the top guy. Roman was the man on top of the mountain and had been for years. At WrestleMania 40, he wrestled Roman to try to topple him and take over and finally end the reign of terror, but failed. Unfortunately, he lost. And the next year, which was last year's WrestleMania 41, which was held in Philadelphia at the home of the Philadelphia Eagles, Cody was finally able to finish his story. And now, he finally won the world championship and ended that 4-year reign. And that moment when Cody Rhodes finished his story, and I need to give you guys a little context on this. It re-energized me with professional wrestling. It gave me, and professional wrestling I will always love, I will always follow, I will always watch. But I had started to fall a bit out of love a little bit with it. It had started to become stale and predictable, especially with Vince, when Vince was still in charge. But thankfully, by unfortunate means, Vince had to step down. He not only stepped down as chairman of WWE, owner of WWE, but he completely left the wrestling industry altogether because of sexual harassment lawsuits and other legal things that had come to light. So when he left, Paul Triple H, his character's name was Triple H, but his real name is Paul Levesque. He took over because he is currently married to Stephanie McMahon, Vince's daughter. So Paul came in and has been doing an incredible job of getting back into the storytelling and trying to keep us guessing from week to week and keeping storylines fresh. And one of the biggest things was WrestleMania 41, the main event, Cody versus Roman, part 2. Roman had his bloodline behind him, as you would expect. He had the Usos. He had Solo Sikoa, which is Jimmy and Jay's brother. He had all of them watching his back. And they were like, Cody's going to get screwed again. He's going to lose. But instead, Cody had his own Avengers there to help him. And Cody had, when Jimmy and Jay showed up, they started battling. Actually, let me take that back. Jimmy and Jay were feuding at this time. So when Jimmy came down to help Roman, Jay came down and fought Jimmy off. So okay, that clears that person out of the way. And then Solo Sikoa showed up to help Roman. And they're like, this is how it's going to end. Roman's going to retain. And then out of the behind the curtain came, at the time, John Cena, who, again, was one of the greatest baby faces, good guys of all time in WWE history and almost wrestling history. He came down, he fought off Solo Sikoa. And everybody's like, yeah, way to go. And then all of a sudden, boom, out comes The Rock, who is related to Roman. And everybody's like, holy S, holy S, holy S. Because we hadn't seen John Cena and The Rock together eye to eye in the ring since, I believe it was WrestleMania 28 or 27 or 28. So 14 years since they headlined a WrestleMania in Orlando and then in MetLife in New York. So they hadn't been together eye to eye in a ring in a long time. So that was a holy S moment for them. And The Rock eliminated Cena, gave him his rock bottom, and everybody was like, oh no, Roman's going to win now. And then all of a sudden, everybody was expecting, and again, this is social media saying, Austin is going to show up, and Stone Cold's going to make an appearance, and he's going to help Cody win. Austin didn't make it because apparently what they're wanting to offer him financially didn't work for him. So instead, you hear gong, gong. Everybody knows what those gongs symbolize, and that is The Undertaker. And everybody, 70,000 strong in Philadelphia, millions watching worldwide, all started saying, holy yes, holy yes, holy yes. The lights come back up. Undertaker standing right behind The Rock, who's not looking at him, with this look on his face like, you dead now. Turns around, Undertaker choke slams him in the ring, and immediately lights go off, comes back, and then there's nothing. It's everybody. And in between this as well, before The Rock and The Undertaker have the little thing, I forgot to mention, you hear the Shield's music, because Roman was part of a faction called the Shield, where it was Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, and at the time he was called Dean Ambrose, but his name's actually Jon Moxley now. He's in AEW. He's their world champion. So you heard the Shield's music, and they were like, "What? Whoa, 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 what's going on?" Because Moxley was part of AEW at the time. They're like, "How can he be here? How is he here in the WWE ring if he's an AEW star?" And the Shield music hit, and it turned out it was just Seth Rollins trying to get Roman back for what Roman did to him, and Roman fended him off. But once The Undertaker chokeslammed The Rock and the lights came back on, it was just Cody and Roman in the ring. And Cody and Roman were getting ready to spear him. Cody blocked him, kicked him, gave him one crossroads, which is named Cody Rhodes' finishing move. One crossroads, picked him up and did a second one. And last year, WrestleMania, he tried to do the third one, but got blocked and he lost. This time, he hits the third one, and he covers him, pins him. 1, 2, 3. Cody Rhodes has finished his story. And you hear Michael Cole on commentary as the referee's counting the pin going, "Finish the story." The roof, there's not even a roof on the building where the Eagles play, but if there was, that roof was blowing off. Everybody screaming, crying, tears in their eyes. At the time, their ring announcer was Samantha Irvin, who no longer works for the company. She was even crying. And she's like, "Here is your winner and new undisputed WWE World Heavyweight Champion, the American Nightmare, Cody Rhodes." And she's crying the entire time. And everybody's all emotional and choked up. Even the announcers are like, "This is what makes wrestling beautiful. Wrestling is back. This is what makes wrestling what it is." And just sitting here saying those words, I'm getting goosebumps right now. That got me back into it. That is Americana. That is professional wrestling. That, if you had never seen it before and you learned about the story and you watched it, you would be hooked. And it was one of the most beautiful things I'd ever seen in a wrestling match and an outcome, and it totally revitalized my love for professional wrestling. So yeah, I mean, again, like I said, guys, it's something that's huge to me, and it's something that I feel is going to be as big of a part of my life as it is going to be for my son's life, and I can't wait to show him more and more about wrestling and what wrestling is, and now, with All Elite Wrestling, you've got alternatives out there. You have legitimate alternatives. Not only do you have All Elite Wrestling as a solid alternative, and I've been to some of their pay-per-views and I've been to their live events, but you also have another company named Total Nonstop Action, TNA Wrestling. They used to be called Impact Wrestling briefly, but they went back to TNA. And they've been around a very long time. They've been around, I want to say, actually since 2001. Or thereabouts. They were around before then. They were NWA, TNA, but I mean, the TNA itself has been around a very long time. And they, again, are another alternative. And the weirdest part was, back in when Vince McMahon was running WWE, he was hell-bent on, initially, because wrestling was in a bunch of territories. It wasn't just a couple companies overseeing everything. You had territories in the Northwest. You had territories in the Northeast, in the Midwest, in the Mid-South, up in in the West, on the West Coast. You had all of these different territories that were run by different promoters. And unfortunately, WWE, Vince, when his dad sold him the company, Vince is like, his dad had all these working agreements with all of these territories. Said, hey, we won't try to buy you guys out. You guys are free to run your stuff. We're just going to do our stuff. And, we might reach out to you for some agreements to have some of your stars appear on our programming, things like that. But when Vince Jr. Bought out the company from his dad, he immediately started gobbling up all the promotions. He wanted it to be just WWE being the only show in town. And to the point where, it was forbidden, essentially, to ever, and it was a pipe dream to ever think that, WWE, they'll never partner with TNA. They'll never partner with, WCW or ECW or anything like that. And there were times where Vince, back in the mid-90s, would throw, like, ECW a crumb and have some of the ECW guys appear on WWE programming and vice versa. But he never did it with WCW. WCW was always competition to him, and he never partnered with WCW. And again, he never partnered with TNA either. He again, would allow some from time to time, like, hey, like when AJ Styles, who was a big TNA wrestler, came to WWE, and they were doing that, they were getting ready to let AJ be in their TNA Hall of Fame. Vince allowed them to, let him be there for it. But he would never partner with them. But now with Paul Levesque being the main driving force behind WWE, creatively speaking, and his friend, who was a fellow Click member, and I'll get into more factions on a future episode, but known as the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels, if you're, again, a wrestling fan, I hope you would be if you're listening to this podcast. His real name is Michael Hickenbottom, so you can kind of see why he went with Shawn Michaels instead of Michael Hickenbottom. But Shawn Michael, he currently is the main driving force behind the NXT brand. And NXT recently, over the last year, has been partnering up with TNA to the point that you have TNA wrestlers appearing on NXT programming, NXT wrestlers appearing on TNA programming. And the biggest one to this point in recent times, the TNA World Heavyweight Champion, Joe Hendry at the time, actually appeared at this year's WrestleMania 42 from the Death Star, aka Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas. He actually, because Randy Orton was supposed to wrestle, Randy Orton was supposed to have a match, but unfortunately his opponent was injured. And it was supposed to be Kevin Owens, but Kevin Owens got injured, so Randy didn't have an opponent. So they're like, okay, open challenge. I'll find anybody in the back who wants to come out. Anybody. And out pops Joe Hendry. And the roof blew off the place because everybody loves Joe Hendry. And everybody believes in Joe Hendry. So if you know Joe Hendry, you understand why I did that. But he comes out. And he's wearing the TNA title. And it's just like a major holy S moment going, whoa, the TNA World Champions on WWE programming. Not NXT, WWE programming at their biggest event of the year, WrestleMania. Joe unfortunately lost, of course, because this was Randy's return match. But Joe got in some good offense. And even Randy was like, dude, you did incredible. And even gave him like a big pat on the back after the match. So things have changed considerably. You now have coming up at a NXT pay-per-view, you have the TNA Women's World Champion going to be wrestling the NXT World Women's Champion in a title match. So what's going to happen there? We don't know. You have to tune in and find out, and that's where they hook you. And that's, again, like I said, this is why I love professional wrestling. And I wanted to get into like my Mount Rushmore of male and female wrestling stars. What I feel are the four or five biggest women's and men's wrestlers of all time. And I even have some of my friends from some of the social media sites giving me their feedback as well. But I want to do that when I can have more time to get more input and make that a completely separate episode. So this professional wrestling related episode is not just going to be a one-time thing. I will continue to inject wrestling into different episodes, and I'll have another completely exclusive wrestling themed episode as well. I'm going to get into things as far as like my favorite matches of all time, my favorite promos that I felt were ever cut by wrestlers, and play some audio clips of that. Put in, again, like I said, my Mount Rushmore of male and female wrestlers as well, and get your guys' feedback. So that is my call to action to you guys for this week's episode. If you are a wrestling fan, and I really hope that you are, considering you're listening to this episode, so again, thank you very much for that. I want to know. I want your Mount Rushmore. I want your top 4 all-time favorite men's wrestlers, all-time top 4 female wrestlers. And in addition to that, I want your top 4 managers. I want to know who you feel were the best mouthpieces for the performers themselves. So I want to know your top 4, your Mount Rushmore of male wrestlers, your Mount Rushmore of female wrestlers, and your Mount Rushmore of managers. So send those to me, please. NFFSHOW on all social media platforms, or on comment on this. This is going to be clipped into one of the reels that I'm going to be putting up on TikTok and YouTube and Facebook and Instagram. So comment to me on here on this reel. Let me know, what are your Mount Rushmore for male, for female, and for managers. I want to know your feedback, and I'm going to play those. I'm going to read them out and put them up on a future episode of the No Filter Friday show, future professional wrestling themed episode of the No Filter Friday show. So I thank you guys very, very much for your feedback. And again, all of your downloads that you've done of my episodes, all of your watches you've done on YouTube, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. It means the world to me that I'm getting this kind of engagement from you guys, and we're continuing the conversation in different areas, be it politics, be it social media, be it mental health, be it professional wrestling, be it nostalgia. I'm glad you guys enjoyed the last episode where we talked about all things patriotic and all things that remind you of the summer, and things that just make you go, man, I miss those days. So I love all the engagement you guys have been providing me, and I really, really appreciate it. And as I said at the top of the episode here, still looking for that co-host and potentially building out an actual show with 3 or 4 people. It might not just be a 2-person thing here. We might get to 3 or 4 possibly if we have a good cohesive unit that we come together and can meet up on and record our things and talk and just bounce things off of each other from week to week. So if you are interested, again, I'm taking emails right now, NFFSHOW on social media, or you can reach out to me. If you want to send me an email, you can do that too. That email is actually info@knopickmedia.com. That's INFO at KNOPICKMEDIA.com. So info@knopickmedia.com. Feel free to shoot me an email. Say, hey, I'd love to be a co-host or part of your team. Here's my background. Here's what I'm interested in. Here's my takes. And if you want to put an audio clip in or a video clip, feel free. I listen to all of them and I give feedback, and I can't wait to hear from you guys. But for now, I'm going to wrap up this episode of the No Filter Friday show, professional wrestling themed episode of the No Filter Friday show. Thank you guys again so much for listening, for tuning in. If you're listening on all podcast feeds such as Podbean, Spotify, Apple, iHeart, Amazon, wherever you're getting your podcast feeds, thank you very, very much for the listens and the downloads. Or if you're watching me on YouTube, thank you guys very much for the views and the comments as well. Subscribe, talk to me. I'm on X as well. I'm on Instagram, as I said, TikTok, Facebook. Subscribe. Let me know what you want to hear on future episodes or see on future episodes. Again, I'm going to be rolling out the AI-themed episode here coming very soon, along with some musical-themed episodes as well, because music is another big part of my life that I am very, very passionate about. But for now, we're going to wrap up this episode of the No Filter Friday show. I, of course, have been John Knopick. Please follow me on all social media platforms, NFFSHOW. Clips will be coming out throughout this week with the full episode dropping this Friday. And as always, folks, as I wrap all of my shows, ladies and gentlemen, take my advice. Pull down your pants and slide on the ice. Have a great week. Stay safe. Love each other. Get out there, watch some professional wrestling, and we'll see you guys on the next episode. Have a great one. Adios and goodbye. And I just realized we didn't hit the stop button, ladies and gentlemen. This is live, and I love it. But again, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Have a great one, and we'll see you guys on the flip side. Adios and goodbye.